Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm XW Rhino, and in today's video I'll be taking a look at the latest Tanks Reforged series, where a host of Chinese tanks have had changes made to them. And in this video in particular I'm looking at the two tier 10 Chinese medium tanks in World War II, the 121 and the 121B. So I'll tell you what has changed with both of these tanks, I'll tell you my equipment and commander setup, and I'll talk you through two good games, one in each of the tanks. So as you can see, we're on Ducal Pass in the 121B in the background, but before I get into what's changed with the 121B, which is a premium tier 10 medium tank, I will run you down my equipment and my commander setup. So equipment wise, on the 121B I run advanced loader, gun stabilizer and advanced optics, which is a very standard medium sort of tank setup. Yeah, I'm just improving my DPM, my accuracy and my view range. And on my commander I run 6th Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Situational Awareness and Camouflage Expertise. And this is the same for both the 121 and the 121B. This is my 121 commander that I'm using, as you can use without cost when you change to a premium tank. So I run the same commander on both tanks. In terms of my commander, 6th Sense and Born Leader are skills that I recommend you use on every single commander build you have. Rapid Loading to improve the DPM. I have a host of gun handling skills. I also improve my view range and my camo, so I'm able to outspot my opponents. So in terms of the 121B, it's a tank that I guess it went slightly under the radar. I didn't see too many of them about. It was nothing sort of special when it came out. It's got a 105mm gun with 390 alpha damage, and it's a solid tank, but not many people seem to have picked it up. I think it seems to have been sort of the more experienced players that have got this, or players that have seen this in action on the PC version of World of Tanks. But with the changes that has been made to this tank, it's sort of even more relevant than before, and I hope to show you in the gameplay in the background that it's a very competitive medium tank and it's quite a lot of fun. And if you're looking for something a little bit different than the tier 10 premiums you already have, then you might want to consider this one. So in terms of the 121B, what did they change? Well, they changed the engine power. They gave it a 100 horsepower buff, so from 580 to 680 horsepower, which means that its power to weight ratio went from 14.5 to 17, which is nice. You get to the battle a lot quicker, and you know, speed is key in a lot of scenarios. And they also changed some statistics to the gun. So on this 105mm gun, they changed the reload from 8.9 seconds to 8.5 seconds, improving its DPM. And they also changed the gun depression, but unfortunately, due to the actual model of the tank, they weren't able to change the gun depression on the front. So they gave it an extra 2 degrees of gun depression on the side. So it went from 5 to 7 degrees of gun depression on the side. So not groundbreaking changes, but a little bit of love for this tank, and it performs admirably. The gun depression can be a little bit of an issue on quite a few of the ridge lines on most of the maps, but you can make it work if you sort of, you know, use that 7 degrees over the side and you try and get sort of height advantage on your enemies. But in terms of the actual gun, it's a very nice gun, 105mm that fires APCR as standard. It's got lovely heat rounds, and it also has HE rounds as its third ammunition choice. So 390 alpha damage on the standard and premium rounds, and 480 alpha damage on the HE rounds, with penetration of 261 on standard, which is very nice, 330 heat, which will butter through the thickest armour at tier 10, and it's got 105mm of penetration on the HE, which actually works quite well, although I just carry a mix of APCR and heat. Shell velocity, it's really nice on the standard APCR at 1478. The heat is very fast as well at 1173, and the HE is 732 meters a second, so you do have to watch out if you do fire some of those HE rounds to lead your targets. But all in all, it's a very decent tank, a very solid tank. Like I said, in terms of the changes, nothing groundbreaking, and that's kind of what this tank is, but it can be quite reliable, and it has some usable armour. So in terms of the 121B's armour, I'll talk about the hull and the turret. So on the hull, if you're looking at it straight on, it's about 240 millimeters of effective armour, and if you angle it at 45 degrees, it's about 280 millimeters of effective armour. On the turret, if you're using the 5 degrees of gun depression that this tank has, and looking at it straight on, the armour effectiveness will be 280 millimeters to the left and right of the gun, and about 290 to 390 millimeters of effective armour in parts of the turret. It's a rounded turret, so if you're trying to shoot and penetrate the turret, go for the flattest part, or if the tank's turret is turned away from you, go to shoot that side as it's the flattest part, and you should be able to penetrate. And if this tank isn't using its gun depression, it's about 280 millimeters of effective armor beside the gun, and about 270 millimeters at the weakest point, and 350 millimeters towards the top. It is a rounded turret, so it has some funky angles. It doesn't hold up as well as it looks like it should do on paper, but you know, that's the same with a lot of tanks when, you know, there are so many gold rounds flying around the game. You can't rely on it, but it does provide you with some chances to bounce a few rounds on this turret. But having said that, it is hard to get it into position to use the frontal turret armour with that 5 degrees. As you can see, I've had to switch to sort of going slightly side on here, and I think I've exposed my the side of my hull, and that 15-16 gets a shot into me. So in terms of the gameplay, we've picked up 4.6k direct damage and 1700 assistance. We've just been playing the sniper and roll at the start, then pushing up and using our view range later on in the battle. In terms of the view range, with my equipment and commander setup, I've got it to 489 meters, which is really nice. I find that this tank has a sort of usable camo to view range ratio, and you can outspot quite a few medium tanks, maybe not some of the sort of more sneaky ones, but it's a perfectly acceptable level and it performs admirably. As you can see, this gun is a very accurate gun, as most guns seem to be after 6.0, but this one in particular feels really nice, and that little boost to the DPM helps a lot. So in that game, as you can see, we have a nice result, picking up 5.6k direct damage. We finish with a victory, finishing in second place on the MVP screen, 1766 assistance, and getting a kill and a high caliber medal. So yeah, that's it for the 121B, and we'll hop on over and look at the tech tree tier 10 Chinese medium, the 121. So we're now into the second replay of the video, and now we're going to have a look at the 121, the Tech Tree Chinese Tier 10 medium tank, and have a look at what was changed with the Tanks Reforged series. And we'll have a look at how this tank handles with some gameplay here on El Alamein. So in terms of what's changed with the 121, in similar fashion with the 121B, they've changed the engine and changed some statistics in terms of the gun. So in terms of the engine horsepower, it's gone up exactly the same as the 121B, from 580 horsepower to 680 horsepower. And that means that its power to weight has gone up from 14.87 to 17.44, so it is ever so slightly quicker than the 121B. And in terms of this tank's 122mm gun, the aim time's gone from 2.7 seconds to 2.5 seconds. The turret rotation accuracy penalties have gone from 0.14 to 0.12, and again the gun depression, like the 121B, has changed from 5 degrees to 7 degrees of depression, but only on the sides, and from the front it's the same as the 121B at 5 degrees. We'll just go over in terms of the gun and the armour real quick for you. So with the 121, in terms of the turret armour, if it's using its 5 degrees of gun depression at the front, It's about 240 to 260 millimeters of effective armor just beside the gun to the left and right, and the sort of frontal part of the turret, as it's rounded again, is between 280 millimeters at the weakest point to 400 millimeters at the strongest points towards the top where it's more rounded. And if the 121 isn't using its gun depression, the armor beside the gun goes to 240 millimeters to the left and right of the gun, and between 280 to 400 millimeters, the same as if it's using its gun depression, due to the rounded nature. So shoot towards the gun to the lower part of the turret and you should be able to penetrate. I should say that both the 121B and the 121 have cupolas, and if this turret is turned, just shoot the flattest part, the part that's facing towards you, and you should be able to penetrate with gold rounds, especially heat rounds, that go through angled armor a lot better than APCR. In terms of the armor on its hull, if you're looking at this tank straight on, it's about 220 millimeters of effective armor, and when it's angled it goes to about 280 millimeters of effective armor. So you should be able to go through this hull very easily with tier 9 tanks, and especially at tier 10. So, in terms of the gameplay with the 121, do I change my gameplay style in terms of the sniper role? I do. I play this slightly more aggressively, nothing to do with the armor, it's purely because of the alpha damage that this tank has. This has a 122mm gun that hits very hard at 440 alpha damage on its standard and its premium heat rounds, the standard rounds being AP rounds, and on the HE the alpha damage is 530. Penetration wise, it's a little bit worse on the standard than the 121B at 258mm, but it has absolutely fantastic heat rounds at 340mm, meaning you can butter pretty much anything at tier 10. And as you can see, we're going to decimate this Jagdpanzer E100 in just a second in the gameplay in the background. In terms of the HE penetration, it isn't as good as the 121B. It's only 68mm for 530 alpha damage. So I purely carry the HE just for sort of base resetting because it's a higher caliber round than the 121B. As it's a higher caliber, the shell velocity is a little bit slower than the 121B. It's 1000 meters a second on all of its rounds, meaning that you do have to lead a little bit more with the 121 than the 121B. But this has got a very nice DPM and it feels really nice with this sort of reload dealing 440 alpha damage. You rack up damage really quickly, and as you can see it can brawl quite well, side scraping using its armor, and we managed to block a Jagdpanzer E100 round just a minute ago. And I'm just trying to find positions where I've got hard cover, where I can side scrape or where I can use my turret and try not to expose too much of my hull, and I'm going to try and make this tank's gun work as quick as possible. I'm gonna fire the heat as necessary. I fired a lot of heat in this round and I was in a pressure situation. I got myself into this brawling area, but I managed to sort of get myself on this lower part where a lot of tanks were converging, and I wanted to get out of this situation as quick as possible, so I fired all my heat rounds there. Personally, I can afford to fire the heat in terms of silver costs. I have a lot of premiums and I play a lot of Cold War, so I can make up the silver, but it can still work very well with the 258mm penetration on the AP. Just bear in mind, you know, it's not quite as good as the 121B, but this is a tech tree tank and it is free, so yeah, why not? As you can see, this alpha damage is really nice for finishing things off like artillery. It had taken a shot before we got that shot in, but it's really good for finishing tanks off that 105mm gun usually sort of wouldn't finish off, and this can high roll and you can get into the sort of 500 alpha damage range, which is nice, the low 500 alpha damage range. And when you do that, it's really nice to see, and you can rack up damage really quickly and have decent games like we're having here. So now we're going to push on. We have 775 hit points left. We can't take them into the next game with us. There's one tank left and I'm going to rush forward and try and get as many shots into this 416, Object 416 as possible. We get one in here, and the gun handling, as you can see, with 6.0, this tank improved a lot and it made it a lot more viable to play, a lot more fun to play. And with this little bit of love that this tank has got, I think it's a really nice tank. And yeah, as you can see, it performed well for me in the gameplay in the background, where we finished with 5 kills. We get high caliber, first class, we pick up 6.3k direct damage, 1342 assistance, 1487 base experience points, and even with all that heat we managed to make some silver. So I hope you've got a little bit more of an idea of what these two tanks play like. The 121B is better at sniping, the 121 can brawl slightly better, they both got decent penetration, and the 121 has cracking heat rounds. So thank you all so much for supporting my channel. I hope you're all having a great week. Until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.